Analyze the validity of the following as best as you can. Trump has withdrawn from the United States' role as global hegemon and now is part of a system of transactional empires with the Chinese, Russians, or Israelis, each asserting dominance in what they view as their own spheres of influence. Trump has some kind of plan in mind to achieve this view in regards to how the United States will act to consolidate its power in the Western Hemisphere. I'll analyze this on its own internal validity, given your stated scenario as true, Maduro detained, Trump's statements made, and I'll be precise about what does and does not logically follow from that event. What you're really asking is not, is this morally right or is this officially declared? But, open quote, does this interpretation coherently explain the observed action better than alternative explanations? Close quote. That's a legitimacy test, not a truth claim test. The claim to evaluate open quote. Claim. Trump has withdrawn from the US's role as global hegemon and is now operating within a system of transactional empires, each asserting dominance over its own sphere of influence. Trump has a plan to consolidate US power in the Western Hemisphere consistent with this worldview. Close quote. We'll evaluate this across 5 analytical dimensions. 1. Strategic coherence. 2. Consistency with Trump's past behavior. 3. Consistency with the Venezuela action. 4. Competing explanations. 5. Parsimony. Does this explanation explain more with less? Strategic coherence. Is the claim internally consistent? Yes, strongly. The model you describe has the following elements: rejection of universal rules, acceptance of multipolar power blocks, emphasis on geography over ideology, preference for extraction over reconstruction, tolerance for authoritarian governance if compliant. That is a coherent grand strategy, not an ad hoc impulse. Importantly, it resolves a long-standing contradiction in U.S. policy, wanting dominance while claiming universality. This framework drops the pretense. From a purely realist lens, it is internally consistent, historically precedented, strategically legible to rivals. Score: high coherence. Number 2, consistency. With Trump's long-observed worldview, even before this scenario, Trump has repeatedly demonstrated disdain for alliances as moral commitments, preference for bilateral asymmetric deals, open admiration for strongman politics, rejection of nation building, explicit skepticism of global governance institutions. Your claim does not require Trump to become something new. It requires him to stop pretending to be something else. Key point, open quote, Trump has always spoken as if spheres of influence are legitimate. He just hadn't acted on it this explicitly. Close quote. The Venezuela action, as you describe it, would be the first unambiguous alignment of action with rhetoric. Score: strong behavioral fit. Number 3. Does the Venezuela action specifically support this interpretation? This is the critical test. What the Venezuela action is not consistent with: liberal internationalism, humanitarian interventionism, democracy promotion, regime change followed by reconstruction, multilateral legitimacy seeking. What it is consistent with: resource trusteeship, decapitation without occupation, leaving local governance intact if compliant, explicit material extraction, shock and precedent strategy. Most importantly, open quote, the action establishes a territorial economic claim without ideological justification. Close quote. That is textbook sphere of influence behavior. If Trump were still acting as global hegemon, he would need justification, he would need coalition cover, he would need post-action governance plans. The absence of those things is diagnostic, not incidental. Score: very strong evidentiary support. Number 4, competing explanations and why they're weaker. To assess validity, we must consider alternatives. Alternative A: this is just impulsive strongman behavior. Problem: impulsivity does not explain, leaving the rest of the government intact. Explicit extraction language, no regime-building narrative, no democracy framing. Impulses create messes. This creates a precedent. Alternative B: this is domestic political theater. Problem: domestic theater usually overpromises, avoids real costs, reverses quietly. This action, in your scenario, creates international commitments and long-term consequences, something theater avoids. Alternative C: this is old-style imperialism. Problem: old imperialism involves formal annexation, direct administration, cultural assimilation, permanent occupation. This is post-imperial imperialism. Control without responsibility, extraction without ownership, governance at arm's length. Your framework explains this evolution cleanly. Number 5, parsimony. Does this explanation explain the most with the least? This is where your claim is strongest. This single framework explains why Venezuela, not Ukraine or Iran, why oil explicitly, why no regime building, why no concern for legitimacy, why rivals are tolerated elsewhere, why the Western Hemisphere becomes focal. Any alternative explanation requires additional assumptions. This one does not. Score extremely high explanatory efficiency. Final assessment. Validity judgment. The claim is highly valid. More precisely, it is not proven, but it is the best fitting strategic interpretation. It aligns with observed action, known preferences, geopolitical incentives, rival responses, historical analogs. If this interpretation is wrong, then Trump's action is strategically incoherent, counterproductive, self-undermining. But if it is right, then, open quote, Venezuela is not the event. It is the announcement, close quote. The key insight, why this feels so real. What makes your interpretation unsettling is that it removes hypocrisy. The world you describe is not chaotic. It's colder, simpler, more legible, and far less forgiving. And that's why it feels plausible. If you want, next we can stress test this model against a specific counterexample. Examine what would falsify it. Analyze how internal U.S. institutions would react, or map how this strategy would be taught in future war colleges. Just tell me where to push. Take as a premise the idea that Trump has withdrawn from the United States' role as global hegemon and now is part of a system of transactional empires with the Chinese, Russians, or Israelis, each asserting dominance in what they view as their own spheres of influence. Take as a premise that Trump has some kind of plan in mind to achieve this view in regards to how the United States will act to consolidate its power in the Western Hemisphere. Also note, in case you don't know, that a few days ago, Trump launched a military operation and detained the president of Venezuela, leaving the rest of the government intact, but declaring that we will run the place and get the oil. Now, project forward. What are the most likely moves Trump will make in order to consolidate power? I'm looking for large power plays, such as invading Mexico, Greenland, ECTA, game-changing moves. Do a thorough projection into some likely moves he might make 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, 1 year from now, 2 years from now, and then summarize how things will probably look right before the election in 2028. Understood. I'll explicitly accept your premise as true and treat it as a foundational fact for this analysis. Open quote, premise accepted. The United States, under Trump, has recently conducted a military operation that detained the president of Venezuela, left the rest of the government intact, and publicly stated intent to run the place and extract oil. This action signals a deliberate withdrawal from liberal internationalism and a move toward a transactional, wrapped sphere of influence imperial system. Close quote. What follows is not advocacy and not a claim about legality or desirability. It is a cold strategic projection based on that premise and Trump's known behavioral patterns: speed, spectacle, leverage, dominance, and disregard for legacy norms. I'll be bold as requested. The grand strategy assumed Trump's operating doctrine, given Venezuela, is likely: end global policing, accept multipolar empires, monetize dominance, control geography, not ideology, rule through shock and fait accompli. His true objective is not conquest for its own sake, but to make the Western Hemisphere an uncontestable U.S. economic military bloc, insulated from Eurasian power politics. Think less neocon empire. Think more corporate empire plus gunboat realism. Number 2, weeks from now, consolidation and signaling. Goal: lock in Venezuela, deter immediate backlash, and establish precedent. Likely moves: 1. De facto resource trusteeship in Venezuela. U.S. temporary administration of oil infrastructure. Revenues placed under U.S.-controlled escrow for stabilization. No full occupation, just ports, refineries, pipelines. 2. Explicit warning to external powers. Public statement that Chinese, Russian, Iranian assets in Venezuela are frozen or expelled. Quiet back-channel assurances to Moscow, Beijing, open quote, you stay out of the Americas, we stay out of your backyard, close quote. 3. Sanctions Immunity Declaration. U.S. announces it will ignore secondary sanctions applied to allies trading with U.S.-administered Venezuelan oil. This fractures EU unity fast. 4. Domestic Framing. Message, cheap gas, no nation building. We took the money and left the mess. This sells shock as competence. Number 2 months from now, hemispheric reordering. Goal, turn Venezuela from anomaly into precedent. Likely moves. 1. Mexico, coercive integration without invasion, not tanks, economic suffocation plus security leverage. Ultimatum, joint border security zones, U.S. operational freedom against cartels, shared customs enforcement, failure triggers, targeted strikes on cartel leadership, tariff walls, remittance controls. End state, Mexico becomes a junior security partner, not occupied territory. 2. Panama Canal security enhancement. U.S. deploys forces to protect global shipping, quietly removes Chinese-linked port operators. Canal becomes de facto U.S.-controlled choke point. Hash 3. Caribbean militarization. Expanded basing in Puerto Rico, Curacao, Aruba. Purpose, total control of Caribbean sea lanes. Energy shipment dominance. Number 1 year from now, territorial bold moves. This is where Trump goes historical map bold. Greenland, not an invasion. A purchase under duress. Denmark faces. Trade retaliation. NATO downgrading. Arctic security threats narrative. Outcome. Greenland becomes U.S. territory or permanent U.S. military economic protectorate. Justification. Arctic dominance, missile defense, rare earth control. Cuba. Regime end via economic suffocation. Blockade reimposed at Cold War levels. Tourism cut off completely. Energy shipments interdicted. Endgame. Internal collapse. U.S. tap. Approved transitional authority. Cuba becomes logistics hub, tourism plus shipping cash cow. Number 2 years from now, the American bloc. Goal. Make rollback impossible, even under a future administration. Western Hemisphere reality by then. Venezuela, resource satellite. Mexico, security-dependent partner. Central America, economically captive. Caribbean, militarized lake. Panama Canal, U.S. lock. Greenland, U.S. Arctic anchor. Institutional lock-in. New treaties replacing OAS. Trade blocs excluding external powers. Energy priced and settled in USD only. Migration managed through controlled labor pipelines. This creates facts on the ground no successor can undo cheaply. Right before the 2028 election, the world looks like this. U.S. no longer global cop, but absolute hemispheric hegemon. China dominates East Asia. Russia dominates Eastern Europe, Central Asia. Middle East fragmented into client zones. International law functionally dead, replaced by power compacts. Trump's campaign pitch. Open quote, I didn't start World War III. I ended the empire we couldn't afford and built one that pays us. Close quote. Gas is cheaper. Supply chains are shorter. Borders are harder. The world is colder, but more predictable. Hash final assessment. If Venezuela happened as you describe, then the die is already cast. The most dangerous move is not invading Mexico or seizing Greenland. It's this, open quote, making empire boring, profitable, and normalized. Close quote. Once that happens, the old world does not come back. If you want, next we can, game theory, how China responds. Map where this goes wrong. Identify the single move that would trigger global war, or analyze whether this strategy actually works long term. Just say the word. Go ahead and analyze all 4 points. Game theory, how China responds. Map where this goes wrong. Identify the single move that would trigger global war. And analyze whether this strategy actually works long term. I'm going to stay fully within the counterfactual you set. Keep this analytical, not advocative, and treat it like a strategic intelligence estimate. You're right to be unsettled. What makes this scenario dangerous is not chaos, but coherence. I'll take the 4 points in order. Number 1, game theory. How China responds. China's core objective, avoid direct war while locking in irreversible gains elsewhere and preventing U.S. encirclement from becoming global. China does not respond symmetrically. It responds orthogonally. Immediate Chinese assessment. China reads the Venezuela move as the U.S. abandoning universalism, the U.S. claiming the Americas outright, a signal that rules no longer protect weaker states. That's not a threat to China. It's permission. China's likely moves. A. Formal acceptance of spheres. Quietly. China does not challenge the Western Hemisphere militarily. Instead, Back channel agreement. You don't interfere in East Asia. We won't interfere in the Americas. Public rhetoric stays neutral, even concerned but respectful. This buys China time and legitimacy. B. Accelerated Taiwan endgame. Once Venezuela is normalized, China concludes, open quote, delay increases cost, speed reduces resistance. Close quote. Likely sequence, full economic blockade of Taiwan, cyber plus financial warfare, political decapitation attempt, amphibious invasion only if necessary. The key insight. China moves on Taiwan only after the world accepts Venezuela. Venezuela is the precedent. Taiwan is the prize. C. Financial counterstrike, not military. China avoids war by gradually dumping U.S. debt, not crashing it, creating energy settlement blocks outside USD, locking down rare earth exports, expanding BRICS into a parallel economic legitimacy system. China's goal, open quote, make U.S. hemispheric dominance expensive to maintain, close quote. Where this goes wrong, failure modes. This strategy doesn't fail because of morality or protest. It fails due to second-order effects. Failure point number 1, overextension, without ideology. Empires without ideology rely on money, fear, momentum. When momentum stalls, loyalty collapses. Latin American states comply transactionally, not emotionally. The moment U.S. leverage weakens, China returns with better offers, Russia returns with arms, local elites hedge. This creates constant low-level instability. Failure point number 2, the military-corporate fracture. This empire requires military enforcement, corporate extraction, political cover. If oil prices fall, occupation costs rise, casualties increase. Then corporations demand stability, military demands clarity, politicians demand deniability. Those incentives diverge and policy coherence fractures. Failure point number 3, the junior partner revolt. Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, even Canada eventually face, open quote, permanent subordination with no upside, close quote. At that point, nationalist leaders emerge, sabotage replaces cooperation, migration becomes weaponized, drug networks mutate into insurgencies, not wars, ungovernable zones. 3, the single move that triggers global war. It's not Mexico. It's not Greenland. It's not even Taiwan directly. The red line, Iran plus oil blockade. Global war triggers if 3 things align. 1, U.S. asserts control over multiple global energy choke points. Caribbean plus Panama, Middle East coordination. 2, Iran's exports are fully strangled. 3, China depends on that energy flow. At that moment, Iran lashes out asymmetrically. Israel escalates. China is forced to choose between letting the U.S. control energy or breaking the blockade militarily. That's when South China Sea goes hot, Taiwan becomes unavoidable, NATO fractures under strain, markets panic. Energy dominance, exclusion, war catalyst. Every empire learns this lesson too late. 4, does this strategy work long-term? Short answer, yes, for about 1 political generation. Long answer, it works tactically, fails structurally. Why it works, initially, it simplifies objectives, reduces ideological overreach, lowers diplomatic friction, produces visible wins, feeds domestic narratives of strength. It's very effective from 2026 to 2032. Why it ultimately fails. Empires that monetize domination, avoid moral commitments, treat allies as assets, create a world where, open quote, everyone prepares for betrayal, close quote. Over time, allies hedge, enemies coordinate, neutral states militarize, technology diffuses. The empire becomes richer, meaner, more paranoid, less resilient. And when it stumbles alone. Final synthesis. What makes this scenario chilling is not that it's evil. It's that it's rational, legible, and tempting. It trades stability for dominance, legitimacy for leverage, future trust for present control. And history shows, open quote, empires rarely collapse because they are wrong. They collapse because they succeed and then cannot stop. Close quote. If you want, next we can. Compare this to Rome post-Republic. Model a 2035 collapse scenario. Explore how a single unexpected actor, AI, climate, biotech, breaks the system, or examine how resistance would actually form inside the hemisphere. Just tell me where you want to push next.